Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown, where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness, where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to Spirit Radio. We're a little bit late. We're having some pretty serious technical difficulties here in the studio, but I think we got it all figured out now. So we are going to go ahead and try and do a radio show here. And
good evening.
Yes, good evening. How are you tonight?
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Besides a little bit frazzled like me.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine now. Okay, everything is under control. So tonight we got a great guest joining us. So tonight on Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, we are happy to welcome to the show Cody Ray DesBiens. Cody is a paranormal investigator, researcher from the Boston, Mass. He specializes in audio and investigative technical equipment with a knowledge in different types of energy fields and physics. He works as the E.V.P. specialist for the Atlantic Paranormal Society, as well as the Society for the Examination of Unusual Phenomena. Both teams based out of Rhode Island. Cody likes to use a fact-based technical approach using common sense when investigating claims of the paranormal. When not investigating, he likes to explore and test new theories and equipment. In addition to his paranormal work, Cody also works as a voiceover specialist, doing voice for radio, TV, and fundraisers. He also does public address announcing for the Major League Baseball games. So let's welcome to the show the very busy Cody Ray DesBiens. Good evening, Cody.
Hey, Cody. Welcome.
Hi, Willie. Hi, Lynn.
Oh, good.
Sorry about your technical difficulties there.
Oh, unbelievable.
I'm so glad to hear your voice this time.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show, Cody. And I'm sorry that we're so far behind schedule.
Well,
no problem.
Once it's
Once
it's posted, nobody will know the difference.
That's right.
Right.
We'll just edit that out. My gosh, your career just took off like a bullet, didn't it? I mean, you've got all of these voiceovers and whatnot. How did you get those?
I know, right? I think it's just being in, the right place at the right time. So back in 2012, I believe it was, the Red Sox public address announcer, Carl Bean, he was the announcer for many, many years. He unfortunately passed away during the middle of the season. He had an unfortunate accident while he was driving and passed away. And during that year, they started, having auditions, throwing people in to see during a game. Pretty cool. So I was asked to announce 2 innings during a Red Sox game at Fenway Park. And they ended up keeping me in the whole game, and eventually asked me back for a few more games, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Such a historic park with a great history, and really the best seats in the house to watch a game and to be a part of history like that. I was the youngest person to ever announce a Major League Baseball game, which was really cool.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, really.
I know, right? So,
that was quite an opportunity.
It was, absolutely. Again, right place at the right time. Everything just kind of fell into place. And then from there, the people had heard that I did announcing and things like that and voiceovers. So I started announcing for some of the bigger events like Comic-Cons and stuff at convention centers and doing voiceovers for, fundraising commercials and fundraising events and things like that. So it's really been fun. Just kind of, it's cool because I can record from home and then I can send things in over the email and stuff, or Dropbox, things like that. So it's great. It's a lot of fun.
So did you interview for that job? You went there to be interviewed and they put you on right away?
So what happened with the Red Sox was, they were. What happens is you sign up for it, and then they would call you, and then you kind of do they'd have you say a few things to see, if you sounded okay and things. So, like when David Ortiz was playing, it would be ladies and gentlemen, up next for the Boston Red Sox, number 34, David Big Papi Ortiz, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they approved that voice, and I was called in to do, I think, the first 2 innings of a Blue Jays game against the Blue Jays. And he said, "You sound great, just keep going." And I did the whole game. And then they ended up cutting me a check that night, and asked me to come back from the Jimmy Fund game because they have an annual Jimmy Fund game.
Yeah.
And being a cancer survivor, they thought it was perfect that I would announce that game as well. Mm. So I ended up going back for a few more games after that and kind of filling in. So it was just a great time, a great experience.
So are you still doing that?
What was that?
Are you still doing that?
I don't do it as much anymore. I more do the big events. Unfortunately, management changed up there, and
it makes a
different behind the scenes things.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been kind of doing my own stuff, almost as a freelancer type deal, which has been working out great for me as well. But if the opportunity comes up again, I would take it in a heartbeat.
Well, I know that you're doing all of this electromagnetic analysis, in your spare time. I mean, what do you do regularly for work?
Well, I do that I do the voiceover stuff, and send things in from home. I also, I went to school for cabinet making and custom carpentry, so I also do that on the side.
Very enterprising.
I specialize in, this is kind of unique, secret compartments. So, when I was in high school, we had to do this big senior project thing. And I ended up touring, which happened to be, the first place I ended up investigating, which is a Newport Castle in Newport on Bellevue Ave called Belcourt Castle. Mm-hmm. And I ended up becoming great friends with the owner. I believe it was on the second season of Ghost Hunters. And I ended up becoming great friends with the previous owner. And she had this, it was like a 17th century jewelry chest. It was about 6 feet tall. And inside of it, there was 60 found secret compartments that she knew of. And she assumed that there was many more. And that really intrigued me. So I ended up building, my own with, different secret compartments and wooden locks and things of that nature. And kind of, word just spread, and I ended up doing that for some other people, building secret compartments in furniture, in chests and things like that. Yeah, exactly. So I ended up doing that. But pretty much every weekend now, I'm out. I stay busy. I'm out with either T.A.P.S or R.I.S.E.U.P. It's been mostly T.A.P.S lately. Doing in-home private cases and doing research on my own during the week. Writing up papers on, like you said, EMF and E.V.P and the connection between the two and my theories. I'm also working on a book right now that I'm planning to have finished by the beginning of 2019 on EVP and EMF, and it's a collection of other investigators that are friend of mine's theories, including people like Jason Hawes, Grant Wilson, John T.A.P.S. I asked them pretty much the same question. Simple questions like, what do you think an EVP is? How do you think it's communicated onto the device? Your experiences investigating, all over the world. What type of locations do you believe, have better results when doing EVP sessions and things of like that nature? Do you think like a certain type of place you get better results at? So it's really a whole collection of history and different views and opinions. Hoping to have that out by 2019.
I'll buy it.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Can't wait for that one to come out.
Great, thanks.
Well, I was listening to one of the shows. Let me see. It was the one that you were on, Jason the Ghost Guy, Paranormal Inquiry.
Yep.
And you revealed a lot of information in that. And what really intrigued me was your opinion of what an EVP is. And let me see if I can find it here. You went on to say that an EVP is an example of a direct communication through electromagnetic waves traveling within a voice frequency range. Now, that's a mouthful. And,
it sure is.
And the question here is the difference between acoustic waves and electromagnetic waves. And it finally clicked in because my big question was, how is it that you get a voice from supposedly a person who's not in a physical body to record on a tape of some kind, be it analog or digital? And that makes all the sense because there's a difference between acoustic, which needs a medium, and then electromagnetic, which does not. And that made sense to me.
It does, but I still have the question, how does a ghost, a spirit, whatever you want to call them, manipulate the electromagnetic waves to come across as a voice?
I think maybe it's done with thought and their own energy signature.
True. Yeah, it's tough. Once I find this a lot. Once you answer one question, or you think you answer one question, 20 more questions seem to pop up in its place. And that's a thing that also crossed my mind. And Lynn, wow, thank you so much for listening to that. That's awesome. That you took note of that.
Oh, interesting.
Which is the first time I've done a lot of these types of interviews, and that's the first time that somebody has done research into what I have said in the past, which is very flattering in a way.
Well, good.
So thank you very much.
We always like to try and
research our guests.
Do some research on our guests, so we know who's coming on. We know what's going on. And I listen to the shows too, so I get some of that credit. She just said it.
Yeah, but you go on to discuss the dynamic mic, and what I didn't understand was. How is it, I guess, from the electromagnetic waves that the entity is using, how is it that the dynamic mic is picking that up?
Okay, so it's being picked up on all the different types of microphones. There's really two main types of microphones. There's the dynamic microphone and the condenser microphone. Mm-hmm. I find that the dynamic microphone, is much more efficient when recording EVP as far as results go. And how it works is, so the way that a dynamic microphone is made, you have to kind of imagine, in the head of the microphone, there's a magnetic field, a magnet with a copper coil kind of floating inside this magnetic field. And then there's a very thin piece of material called the diaphragm. And when a wave hits this diaphragm, it moves the coil up and down, which then creates a voltage which travels to the device, making an electric representation of whatever it's picking up. So what's interesting about the dynamic microphone is that it's also sensitive to these electromagnetic waves as well, which as you mentioned, we can't hear. but this microphone can hear. And how I tested that out was, like I said, I went to a trade school, learned carpentry. I took electrical classes, and on my free time, I like to build electric guitars. So I had a lot of spare electric guitar parts available, and just a little bit how one of those work, if you're not familiar. So you have magnetic coils in the head of the guitar, the base of the guitar. And what happens when you strum the ferromagnetic string, it disrupts that electromagnetic field, which, kind of like a dynamic microphone, creates an electric representation which travels through the coil and out of the amp. So basically, I wanted to try figuring out if this theory had any back to it. So
You're lucky it didn't backfire. Could have blown up on you because you reversed it.
Right? Exactly. I reversed it. And because if it was possible that they could be communicating in this way, then I should be able to make it, through artificial EMF. So I just put some music on my phone. I plugged it into the input on the amp, and I plugged the guitar into the headphone jack. And, of course, I turned the amp on. You couldn't hear anything with your own ears because it's electromagnetic waves coming out of these coils now. And then I just, I pointed my dynamic microphone at the guitar, and, lo and behold, I heard the music clearly. And the strange thing was it had that E.V.P kind of sound. If you listen to a lot of E.V.P, they kind of have that sound to it, that certain texture to it, per se. And it had that, which I was like, all right, so maybe there is something to this.
It was very clever of you to do that.
What's that?
It was very clever of you to do that.
Yeah, I'm the type of person that loves to, just try figuring things out. When I love getting, new pieces of equipment and just taking it apart and, seeing if it does what the manufacturer says it does, claims it does, seeing if it's actually useful in the field. I like to only use equipment that has some sort of data logging internal system on it. Because, the field isn't, as isn't scientifically proven, but I like to, ride the scientific method as closely as I can. And to do that, you need data. You need recorded data. So I like trying to figure things out and see if it actually can be applied. The other thing is, that's the way it worked for E.V.P, to answer your question. I wanted to try figuring it out how this was happening. There's so many theories out there, that it's somehow imprinted on the tapes or the digital recorder, or it's, there's some theories out there that through psychokinesis it's somehow, imprinted on
maybe,
tapes.
Just maybe, psychokinesis.
It's true. Those theories, in my opinion, just didn't fit into how physics would explain something. And, it's tough because, I'm trying to apply physics to a whole different realm where they have their own physics. And, their physics could be totally different than our physics as we know it here on Earth. So it's tough trying to apply our physics to, what's happening paranormally. But I think I found a way that it could be possible if this is the way it's happening.
You did find a way, but it still begs an explanation, and I don't know if we've got the words to understand it, because as Willie said, how is it that they're manipulating, without a voice, the electromagnetic field? Is it through a thought process? Is it psychokinesis? Contingent on that, I was just reading a story. This is going to be for one of our other guests, but there's a story about a computer that appears. These people had a computer in their house, and come to find out they were living with a 16th century ghost, and the ghost was communicating with them on the computer. And the way it was being done, they think, because he wasn't typing, he didn't have a keyboard, he was thinking what he wanted to say, and it appeared on the screen. So in his time frame, the computer was there, although he could not move it. But he could see it. So I guess he just thought what he wanted to say, and it was in 16th century English, and they read it on the screen. So that's almost the same process. wouldn't you say it's very close?
True, absolutely. And I have to agree with you because, it's you have to think there's like this big universal theory that, spirits are made up of energy. And, when, we have voice boxes, vocal cords here on Earth, living people have these.
That's acoustic.
To make an acoustic sound, right,
Yeah.
you need a material, you need an object to create an acoustic sound.
That's right.
So, when we move on to this other realm, we, theoretically, we don't have any of that.
Yeah, what's the medium?
We're moving from a realm of mass and energy to a realm of pure energy where it's just energy. So are they thinking, what to say, and that's how it's communicated? It's that whole thing where, 20 more questions pop up once you think you got the answer. So it very well could be possible. But the main thing with, coming up with this theory is that, we can better pinpoint a true E.V.P. Because, I feel like if the field is going to move forward and go anywhere or get the attention of people with really expensive equipment, scientists, that, I personally, I have nowhere near the budget to afford. They have the budget, though, these government facilities and things like that.
Sure.
If we want to get their attention, we need data. We need a lot of it, too. And if it's, let's just say this is how they're talking to us through these EMF waves. Now we can, document, a true E.V.P. per se in black and white with sensitive electromagnetic detectors, which, that's a whole study that I've started, using natural tri-field meters and, that have been adapted to record things of that nature. And this also can help us, throw away a lot of the supposed E.V.P. that really isn't. Which 8 times out of 10 I found, through analyzing things, because, my analyzing process is really extensive. And, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes I make some people upset just because
you analyze it to death.
I can take it so far. So, I'm using things like voice analysis and spectrum analysis. I adapted an algorithm that counts syllables, looking at the phonetics of a clip to see if it has vocal properties or it's a mechanical noise that sounds like a voice.
Well,
that happens a lot.
Do you also take intonation into account and modulation of the voice? Intonation of words?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that certainly is their identifying factor so that you could rule out someone else who was in the room with you.
Sure, yes, and I also have this software. So what happens is, like, let's say, me, you, and Willie, we're doing an E.V.P. session, and I'll have a sample of each of our voices. And, each of our voices are different. It's just like how everybody looks different. Our throats are all different. Our jaw structure, facial structure is all different. So all of our sounds, all of our words, they all sound different, and they all have unique properties. Well, this software will look at each individual unique property that makes our voice ours. Mm-hmm. And even if we're whispering, it can tell that it's your voice. So I can input a sample of each of our voices into the software. And if we get, a clip that sounds a little strange, I can import that to the software, and it'll compare it to each of the, vocal characteristics to see if it has any, what's the word I'm looking for? Any similarity,
right?
And to narrow it down a little more that it definitely wasn't one of us. So it's just extra steps to build a foundation that the clip really is something paranormal and unique.
Okay, could you hold just for a second there, Cody? Since we started a little bit late, it's 11 o'clock, I have to do the legal thing. You are listening to WSCALP 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Okay, that's all. And then at quarter past, we'll do the bottom of the hour.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, now this is getting just a little bit away from what we were just discussing, but it is something I wanted to ask you about. You were in a library, and I think you were with Tiffany Rice, and you had been in the attic, but you were setting up the equipment, and there was a woman, an older lady, that walked in with a purple winter coat, and she was carrying book bags. And you were saying that this was kind of an unsettling experience for you. Now, you later found out, after looking at younger pictures of a woman, and you determined that perhaps this was the woman. Now, what I'd like to know is, was it ever clear at any point at what age she died? Were you seeing her as she would have been had she lived that long? Or had she died at that age that you saw her at? Do you know?
Yes, so I ended up seeing her at a younger age than when she had passed away. I believe she passed away in her 80s, which the picture that they had showed us was her when she was older. And, as soon as I saw the picture, I was like, wow, that's her. Her name was Sally Coy. And I was like, wow, that's her, but she's older in the picture. And, to this day, I mean, she looked just like a living person. And, that really, we went back and forth with, some of the other investigators in T.A.P.S. I went back and forth with them for a while, just because I was trying to convince them that, this was...
It's the person that walked in.
Right, this was the person that walked in. And I waved goodnight. She said goodnight to me. She walked into the elevator, and, that was the end of it. We didn't find this out. We didn't come to this, whole debate until a few weeks later. And, I was saying, well, rewind the security cameras, because she had to be on the security cameras. And unfortunately, the security cameras had already looped over. I guess they loop over every week, once a week, the hard drive space.
Yeah.
And this was about 2 weeks later. So, as I'm trying to think back and remember this, I'm like, wow, I don't think I remember her pushing the button on the elevator and waiting for the elevator to come.
Didn't hear the ding.
Little things. Yeah, there was just little things that weren't making sense after that. But she looked younger. And I guess, after talking with some of the, librarians that had been at the library for a while, who have done historical research, and actually knew people that worked with her, when she worked at the library, her majority of her life that she worked there was around that age, in her 50s, 60s, that I had seen her in.
Okay, so she probably wasn't working at the library at the time she died.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in trying to understand this, Cody, I've been thinking about light wave frequencies rather than audio frequencies. So why is it that some ghosts appear to us as solid so that the light doesn't pass through them, whereas others are translucent? If they're solid, it would seem that they are totally in our dimension, in our 3D or 4D world, however you want to say it. And if they're translucent, I would almost think that it's like an intermingling of a few more dimensions, maybe 5, wherever it is they are, and then time, and then 3D. But how is it that the ghost appears to be solid? I don't understand that.
True. Yes, it's very perplexing to think that.
Yeah.
And, I've also, thought about this and talked to, physicists and people, that have studied, different realms and different theories on how that could be possible. And, it got to a point where, going into string theory and different types of wormhole theories, that, could it be possible that the conditions are just right, including, the geological makeup of the location, the weather, all these conditions are right, that it kind of just opens up, whatever you want to call it, wormhole, portal.
So that you've got two parallel realities that are actually, operating the same time and space, I guess. Right,
exactly. And, it's really deep to think like that. But, there's a lot of knowns in the field, and it could be possible, because, like you said, she was solid. Am I seeing this as it's unfolding? But she's still able to interact somehow, which is strange. But I've done a lot of research on different types of light spectrums and why people see spirits and others don't. Especially, people with abilities like mediums per se. And my good friend Dustin Parry and Barry Fitzgerald, they were doing this study for a while. And I kind of, looked into it after, they had, done their research on it because I was just so interested. And one really cool thing that I think you'll appreciate is, looking into the eye and the eye work. So when we're born, and it's very similar to our hearing, when we're born, and as we grow older, our eye develops almost like a contact lens to protect our eyes from UV rays.
Okay.
And as we grow older, that lens gets thicker and thicker. So eventually it blocks out, a good percentage of UV rays to protect our eyes from the sun. Some people, they never develop this UV lens. So they're essentially, we're babies. We're the age that our eyes fully develop. We're able to see into the UV spectrum of light because our eyes don't have that lens yet. And as we grow older, obviously, that lens gets thicker. Some people, it's rare, but some people, they never develop that lens. So is that why children are able to see these types of spirits when they're young? And that's why, is it possible that, adults that are able to see spirits, they just didn't develop that UV lens, which I think it would be a cool study just to have people that claim they have abilities to have an eye exam to see if they have this lens. And I think that would be a great collection of data, a great case study to work on.
Oh, I agree with you. Wow.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, because you do wonder where almost everyone perceives the paranormal in different ways. I can walk through a house and I'll pick up a name, someone else will pick up a scent, and someone else will see something. And someone may not see the same thing that somebody else does. Someone may see only a column of smoke or ectoplasm, and someone else may see a translucent figure or a full-body apparition. So it's very puzzling what is it physiologically? How is it that we perceive so differently? So that eye idea, the eye testing, would be really very telling.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's the same with our ears. Everybody hears differently. And, a perfect set of ears can hear only a certain spectrum between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz or 20,000 hertz. And as we grow older, usually that spectrum gets smaller and smaller, and nobody has perfect hearing. And could these waves be coming in at different levels, different hertz levels? That could be the explanation why I might hear something and somebody else may not hear something because their ears just don't hear that far into the frequency. It's great to think about.
The normal hearing range is 20 hertz to what?
20 kilohertz or 20,000 hertz.
So there's not even a range, it's just at 20 kilohertz? 20
hertz, 20 kilohertz. And then anything above 20 kilohertz is ultrasound. Anything below 20 hertz is infrasound.
Oh, I got it.
So it's theorized that, that they mainly talk within ultrasound or infrasound. I found, with looking at clips that I, truly believe to be an E.V.P, that most of the time that they're coming in ultrasound above 20 hertz or just below 20 hertz. And I found that unexplained noises like doors closing that we didn't hear live when it was happening come in on the lower end of the spectrum in infrasound. Why that is, I have no idea.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's why a spectrograph really comes in handy because you can see exactly, where the clip is coming in on the sound spectrum.
Yeah.
And, I get the question a lot also with, my theory of an E.V.P being EMF waves. How do you know that it's not a radio station or a Wi-Fi signal that's interrupting? Well, all radio stations, they operate on a certain frequency, usually in the gigahertz range. And, when looking at a spectrograph, you can see, that frequency. If it was, a stray signal, it's much rarer than people see that our recorders would pick this up. But if it was, if somehow it made it through, you would see it on the spectrogram, and automatically I would throw it away because it's in that range.
And it would be on the higher end, wouldn't it, Cody? Be on the higher
it
end?
Would be on a much higher end.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess this is where we're going to have to take a quick break. This is our technical bottom of the hour.
Yeah, we're gonna call this the bottom of the hour, even though it's 4:15.
So if you could sit tight for just a couple of minutes, and we've got more questions for you when we come right back.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we will be right back then. Supernatural Magazine, one of the UK's top paranormal magazines, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com. And you are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And you are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And tonight our guest is Cody Ray DesBiens. He is a expert in audio and E.V.P. He is the E.V.P. specialist for the Atlantic Paranormal Society and for the other one with that long name, which I lost my paper. Anyway, welcome back, Cody.
Thank you very much, Willie.
Rhode Island Society for the Examination of Unusual Phenomena. You were with them for 7 years.
That's the one. I misplaced that paper and I couldn't remember the name of it.
Then 5 years with T.A.P.S. Okay.
That's true.
Now, here's another question that came up through the course of you talking about one of your really interesting experiences. You went to a house where one of the daughters had passed away, and you were setting up equipment, and you heard a full sentence mentioning September 10th. I don't recall what the full sentence was. Later on, nobody else heard what you heard. Later on, the date September 10th came up on the recorder. Now, I'm trying to reconcile in my mind how the heck that happened. Do you think it was two separate messages? Do you think that September 10th on the recorder was sent at the same time you heard your interpretation of what you thought you heard?
Yes. Yes, in a way. It's very strange. I think, disembodied voices or E.V.P, audible voice phenomena, is a kind of like a totally different process than the way an E.V.P is communicated, which is strange to think about. But when this happened, I believe that it was said, obviously, with acoustic waves, in a way that I acoustically heard it. But if it's coming from a spirit, theoretically, it still has electromagnetic properties. So I believe that the recorder picked up the electromagnetic portion of what I heard, and I picked up the other portion. Now, why did I only hear it? I think it also could be a number of things. It could be because the other two female investigators were having a conversation and weren't really paying attention to what was happening. They were also approximately 20 feet away from me. Could it be possible, with that whole hearing range thing that, it happened in a range that I could hear and they couldn't? I like to think that it was the first one, that they were just having a conversation and weren't really paying attention to listening for, voices.
But Cody, that doesn't answer the question of the disparity between the content, because the recorder only said September 10, but you heard a full sentence with September in it. How do you account for the disparity?
Exactly. Yeah, I believe I heard, "Are you going to be there, or are we going to be there on September 10th?" Which, it really perplexed me for a long time. And to this day, it still does.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the questions. And looking at it in a spectrograph, it's coming in on a normal speaking voice within the harmonic levels that, a female voice should be talking in.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that, it could be a mix. Like we were talking about earlier when I saw, the librarian there, how, where I was able to see something solid. Well, on the flip side of this, I was able to hear, a voice, something acoustic.
That's right.
So I believe that could be some sort of connection there. But that's just one thing that I really can't explain at this moment, why that happened. And, why the recorder only heard, September 10th.
Yeah.
So it's really strange to think about. And, there have been nights where I've thought about it for a long time, trying to come up with something. And, I get to a point where, my brain hurts after a while because it just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
It could just be another set of laws of physics that we just don't know about yet.
Exactly. And it would make sense that, if we're made up of energy in the other realm, pure energy, that already is a whole new set of physics. So it absolutely, 150%, I believe that it's a whole new law of physics on the other side that's interacting with our law of physics. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And who's to say why?
It's strange to think about.
And then you do get EVPs sometimes that are exactly what people hear with their ears, and it's picked up on the recorder. So from a disembodied voice. So that too presents pretty much the same question. It's mind-blowing to me.
It is. And there has been some research that I've done with what's called sympathetic resonance.
Okay,
and what that is, there was a professor overseas in the UK, I believe his name was Vic Tandy, and, he was in his workshop one day, and I believe he was working on, fencing swords, fencing material, and he had a piece of thin aluminum in a vise in his workshop, and, he would hear these strange things in his workshop, these strange noises. So what was happening was he had a fan in his workshop, a fan that was like an oscillating fan.
Mm-hmm.
And everything puts out a hertz range. Everything has a frequency. So this fan was putting out a frequency that had a sympathetic resonance to this foil, this aluminum that was in the vise, which then created an acoustic sound. So with that happening, so he was able to document that and figure that out. Could it be possible that on some occasions there's something in the room that has a sympathetic resonance with the other side?
I think so.
That's coming through.
Because sometimes people will hear music or voices like coming through the air conditioning system, or when you do have a fan on. I've heard other people say that. It's almost like it builds a resonance like a white noise that something can come in and communicate, that is picked up, magnified or amplified. What do you think?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's amplified. You can easily, with that theory, an electromagnetic wave can be converted into an acoustic wave just because whatever the object that's in the room that has the same resonance frequency as the EMF wave that's emerging vibrates in the same manner, creating an acoustic wave.
Then you can hear it.
Right, exactly. So I don't believe that happens on every occasion that a disembodied voice is heard. But I believe it does happen if the conditions are right, and sometimes it happens creating an acoustic sound.
I agree.
That story sounded familiar to me. Victor Tandy was it?
Candy?
Yes, Vic Tandy, I believe. Tandy.
Steve Parsons has mentioned him.
Oh, has he?
Are you familiar with Steve Parsons?
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of ours.
And all his study in infrasound.
His study on infrasound. That's where he brought it up.
Oh yeah. He's like the king of infrasound.
Yeah, the guru of
infrasound.
Ron Kolick and Steve had me on at a segment, and Steve is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to infrasound. He actually contributed to the book that's coming out that I'm working on.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah, Ron Kolick always beats us to guess, but we eventually, we get him too.
That's great.
He has all these connections, but we find out about him. But anyway, getting back to that with sympathetic resonance, I moved into a condo that had been owned by a friend of our family's, and I did not want to sleep in his bedroom. And I was in the process of liquidating some of the stuff in there, so I slept in the spare room, and the air conditioning system came on, and I swear I was hearing flute music through the air conditioning system. There were other things that happened in there, but come to find out, that was his bedroom, the huge room he left for guests. So, I don't know, just kind of an odd thing that when the air conditioning system came on, I heard flute music, and he was very much into the Native American culture, and his ashes were tossed into the Grand Canyon. So that was one example, and then there was another story that I read in Fate magazine, and it was called The Fan People. And whenever they had a fan going on, they could hear people talking outside. And apparently, it happened to be former residents of people that had lived there. So there's that synchronicity. I found that very interesting.
Wow, yes, I do find that very interesting as well. It's amazing, when the conditions are right and things line up perfectly, it's amazing what can happen.
Yeah. So when people think that they hear noise coming through the air conditioning system, sometimes I think they really do. I did.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, if things are, perfectly right,
aligned.
It can happen.
Yep. I don't want to spend too much time on equipment, but Willie and I both have Tascam recorders, and I'm going to look into getting a dynamic mic.
Absolutely, yeah. I use Tascam recorders as well. I have the DR70, which is the 4-track recorder. I also have the DR05, I believe it is, and I use both of them. But the 4-track recorder, I have it set to record in 4 tracks. Of course, those recorders have condenser microphones built into them. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 tracks with condenser microphones, and then I plug in a dynamic microphone into one of the tracks, and then I leave the other track open, for something else, whether that's another condenser microphone or an EMF to audio wave conversion sensor, something like that. But what's really great about doing that, recording both condenser microphones and dynamic microphone tracks at the same time, is that you can compare, in software after you record to see which microphone is working better, which is how I came to the conclusion that dynamic microphones were great. And, you can get one for, pretty cheap. A pretty good quality one can run you around, $20 to $30.
Oh, yeah, that's not bad.
It works great for this type of work. Which is
one question, I heard you talking about this, and the host asked you, how can you tell it's a dynamic mic? And you said dynamic mics don't use any batteries. Now, my question is, a mic that needs phantom power, is that dynamic mic?
That would be a condenser microphone.
That's a condenser.
And then you have like the electric microphones and things like that. But the 2 main ones are condenser and dynamic. But a phantom power usually is a condenser microphone because it needs that power to operate. I forget the word it is, but it has a condenser microphone. Basically has 2 pieces of thin material And, you need that voltage to move one of the other pieces of material, and that acts like a diaphragm. So if it needs power, it's usually a condenser microphone.
Right. Okay. All right.
Then my last technical question. So when you're doing your analysis, the spectrum and everything else, do you just take the card out of the recorder, pop it into the computer, and then you can see all of the different tracks at the same time?
Right.
Or do you have to listen individually?
Well, I do exactly that. My recorders have memory cards, so I take the memory card out, and then, for example, with my 4-track recorder, it has 4 tracks, 4 separate files, and then when I upload it into the software, I layer the files, so it's just one on top of the other.
Yeah, okay.
And if I hear something, I listen to all the tracks at the same time, and if I hear something that sounds strange, then I start muting the tracks one by one to see where it's coming through at.
Okay.
What do you use for software? Programs for.
Right. So my main program that I use, for the spectrographs and things like that, it's a program called E.V.P, and I believe you can get that online. I'm not sure of the price of it. I had somebody that worked, for the government that gave me a copy of this. But that's a great program if you want to look at the hertz frequencies of a clip coming in and you want to layer tracks and things of that nature. Yeah. It also has a great denoising feature on it that can get rid of a hum. A lot of other software, when you denoise it, it makes the clip and voices sound very tinny, like you're talking into a tin can. And this is the only program that I found that keeps the acoustic sounds perfectly clear. So E.V.P is a great software for that.
Yeah, okay, I've heard of that. I'm going to have to check that out.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
I'll probably find out it's an expensive one, and I can't have it.
Going to spend more money.
I believe you can get a free copy of it online. So,
okay, now we're talking.
The trial version.
Oh, cool. I'm not sure how much time we have left here.
I got about 14 minutes or so.
Oh, 14. Okay, great.
About that.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you. You had mentioned everybody wants to know the creepiest place you've been and la-di-da-di-da, and when you were scared out of your wits. So you did mention that jails seem to bother you. You find them very unsettling. So could you tell us about that and anything else that has really kind of scared the daylights out of you?
Well, the jail, I mean, it's there's been very rare occasions where, things have scared the daylights out of me. I've had more like eye-opening experiences, like, when the girl passed away and I heard the September 10th.
Yeah.
The jail thing, was very creepy. That was another experience where I heard a disembodied voice, a girl singing, and I almost, which was really cool, why I always encourage everybody to monitor the environment. I could see that something was going to happen. The barometric pressure dropped, the humidity was starting to change, EMF levels were starting to spike a bit, and then all of a sudden I heard this girl singing. And the strange thing was, it sounded like it was coming from, the top corner of the room. I could definitely pinpoint where it was coming from. And, I was in a brick cell. So that was very strange. And, of course, the acoustics of the room were echoing this thing and bouncing it around, which was amplifying it even more. But that was just very unsettling. And I think the atmospheric changes were also having an effect, maybe causing hypersensitivity, which was making me feel on edge as well. Because, I have that all documented in black and white on a file. I can see when the temperature changed, when the atmospheric pressure changed, when the EMF changed. And it changed to a level where, it could have an effect on me. So that was very strange. I also visited recently the Hinsdale House in upstate New York. And that place was very strange. It had a very odd feeling, very on edge.
It's a mansion, isn't it? A mansion?
That one is, it's just like a house in the middle of nowhere. It really is in the middle of nowhere. With, not a lot of native history. There was also some, deaths on the property.
Mm-hmm.
It's been featured on many different other shows and things like that. But that place was very strange. We also had a strange experience where we got, somebody had some sort of app or Box, I think it was called, which I don't really put a lot of my stones in one box when it comes to those types of devices, just because they're so unreliable. But the strange thing was we didn't get anything out of it until this one point. We had a word come through that said, it called us earthies, and then it said, we're watching you from above. So that really made me think. And then looking back at early parapsychological research, people were calling these voices from beyond, because truly, we don't know where these voices are coming from and what they are. Mm-hmm. They could be other life forms for all we know, and that's thinking way out there too. But what do I think it is? I think it is spirit energy that's talking to us, that was just a strange experience.
Wow.
Okay, you mentioned apps and stuff. That's one thing I want to ask you about. What is your take on all these new gadgets? Are they just
like the ghost apps that show up?
Yeah, the ghost apps, and I mean, like Spirit Box, Frank Box, phone apps, all that kind of stuff. Are they just toys, or is there anything to them?
I have seen some strange things happen, when asking for specific things. But there have been some of the apps. I don't recall any of the names right now because I don't pay attention to them. Yeah. But being a person that likes to take things apart and figure things out, there have been some apps where I've taken apart the coding of the apps and found that some of them use the GPS locator on your phone. And when you go to a location that has a significant interest, for example, like the Lizzie Borden house, the app will spit out words that, can relate to that location. For example, like axe or murder. So it uses your GPS in your cell phone to see where you're at. And the rest of the time, it just will spit out a random word that, a lot of times you can make sense with the environment around you. As far as the radio wave apps, that switch radio waves, between milliseconds and things like that, there's just so many variables as to what it could be. There's so many variables of interference that it could be. I mean, you're listening to radio stations. If you ask how old you are and it says number 7, who knows if there's a baseball game on and number 7's up to the plate. You just don't know. There's so many variables, and it's so hard to control. But there have been times where I've heard some strange things. So I think it might have some potential, but it's definitely not at a point where I can use it on an investigation to collect data.
Right.
That's what I'm about to look for.
Yeah, that's the way I've always looked at them. It is just radio signals, so you don't really know what it is that you're catching.
Yeah. And other EMF stuff. Do you find, Cody, that when you go into a haunted place and you have to set up all your equipment and you're watching all of your meters and so forth and you're monitoring everything, do you find that it kind of takes away from the rest of your experience?
I've seen so many people that do that. The cool thing, the reason why I really like the data logging equipment is because that it can do its own investigation on its own. There's been so many times where I've seen investigators, that have every piece of equipment on these rigs that they hold in front of them. They're all lined up, and they're looking down. And they're looking down the whole investigation. There could be like a spirit doing jumping jacks in front of them, and they wouldn't recognize it because they're too busy looking at their equipment. So what I usually do is I just set the equipment up, around the location, and I just let it record. And then I look at the data afterwards.
Okay, good.
One really great thing that you have to make sure you do with that is make sure everything is synced together. Yeah. Meaning the time on every device is synced together so you can correlate different pieces of equipment with each other.
I think the clapping is a good idea. Yeah. Setting them up and then clapping, and then you have...
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
An excellent idea.
The recording devices, yep. Yeah. That's great. I do the same thing.
Are you at all psychic, Cody, or do you rely on the electronics and the technical side of it?
I do. I like to say I'm a psychic as the desk that.
No, that's not true. You had that experience when you were 10 years old.
That's what I always say too. I'm about as psychic as a rock. Lynn, on the other hand, she's the sensitive one.
Yes, I do believe that people really have some special gifts. I believe everybody is sensitive, though.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially if you're in this work and do it as often as I do it. Pretty much every week I'm in a client's home or something. You become in tune as to when a spirit energy is near you. You can kind of feel it, but I can't, interact with them psychically or any of that. But just through experience, I can, kind of feel and use my own senses to tell when something's up, if that makes sense.
Definitely intuition enters into it a lot.
Absolutely.
There are so many different levels of intuition and perception and clairvoyance and clairaudience and whatnot. So there are just so many different levels. How many more minutes?
While we're getting down to the end here, we only got just a few more minutes left.
I have one more question.
I did want to bring up one thing. I asked you about this beforehand, Cody, just to make sure that you were okay talking about it. And that was your battle with cancer?
Yes. Yep. It definitely, so I was diagnosed, for those that don't know, with leukemia back in 2011, October of 2011. I ended up having a bone marrow transplant in 2013, the beginning of 2013, which put me in remission. They don't really call it a cure yet because there's just not enough research, but they're calling it a cure because, there's no signs of it coming back,
That's wonderful.
which is great. But that whole experience, I believe, really brought me closer to what I do. There definitely was some times where there was some, near-death experiences, different, allergic reactions to medicine, which sent me into, anaphylactic shock and things of that nature. And I saw some strange things at one point because, there was one instance, I'll talk about it quick because I know we're running low on time, where, they didn't hook me up to a heart monitor, and I was allergic to the drug that they put me to sleep with to do a test. I ended up having a blood infection, and they had to take out the port that was in my chest to put the medicine in. So they had to take that out. They put me to sleep with a drug that I'd never had before. I ended up being allergic to it. And I had the most profound experience. I ended up seeing a whole group of people. Some of them I knew, most of them I didn't. But long story short, I remember seeing myself on the table. I remember seeing everything that the doctors and surgeons were doing. I was able, once I started talking again, which took hours because I was just in shock afterwards, they didn't really believe me until I was able to tell them, what was going on in the room while I was asleep. Everything, that they were doing in order that they did it and what tools they used. So then they started believing me. But I was able to pinpoint some of the people that I didn't know, looking through family albums and things like that.
Really?
So that whole experience, before that, I was in the pursuit, like most investigators, to find out, is there life after death and what's out there. But after, that whole experience, as well as being in the paranormal and investigating often, I believe that question has been answered for me personally, that there definitely is something after this world. And it has moved to my mission or goal has moved to more documenting, obviously helping other people out, understanding. Grant, one of T.A.P.S founders there, always said something that I like to follow, which is fear is just a lack of knowledge. So I like giving that knowledge to people that are scared in their homes. But that whole cancer experience definitely opened my eyes and brought me closer to the paranormal realm. Absolutely.
Wow, there's a lot to go through.
Yeah, really, there is. I didn't bring that up as a downer. I think it's very. It shows. Yeah, it just shows never give up. Right.
That's true.
And
that's true.
Very enlightening.
Yeah. And that there's always hope, and it turned out good for you, and we're certainly glad of that.
We're thankful. Like having you around, Cody.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me just run by you one quick little theory, which has to do with EMF. And we were talking about the spectrum range that, one end is ultrasound, the other end is infrasound. And in the EMF fields, the lower end can really be harmful to human beings. And if it resonates at I forgot what the count is, what the value is, the numerical value. But if it resonates at the right frequency as your organs, you can have organ failure and you can die. And what I'm thinking is, what about these places that people go to that they deal with lower level entities that resonate lower? And couldn't that affect their health and affect them physically? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Think
absolutely. And that's a whole other thing that I've looked into as well. It can cause a multitude of things.
Yes.
Commonly, it's rare, but most commonly with people that are really sensitive, it can cause seizures, temporal lobe seizures. It affects the temporal lobe, which is terrible. But a lot of the side effects from this type of exposure can also be side effects of paranormal activity. So I believe absolutely, I agree with you that it can have an effect.
Yeah, are you familiar with Joni Mayhan?
I don't believe, not familiar enough to know the work.
One of her,
that sounds familiar.
One of her books was Soul Collector, Ghost Magnet.
Oh, yes. Soul Collector.
Soul Collector, yeah. She dealt with this very negative entity, and it did make her ill, and I don't know if it gave her headaches, but it can make you sick to your stomach. And I just can't help but feel that if you subject yourself to that field, knowing that there's something really negative there, I don't know, it takes a lot of protection and I don't know what else, faith, to combat that. But I can't help but feel that it's dangerous to do that.
Absolutely. And, like you said, could these negative spirits, which thankfully I can count on one hand where I believe I've encountered something, negative, or a person that actually lived on this earth that just had a negative attitude. Mm-hmm. Not sure what to call it. But could it be possible that these type of people, that they're the EMF that they put out is, like you said, at a lower range that it can affect us.
Could be sickening.
In a bad way, which gives us that feeling that it's negative.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to look into. It's tough because it's not a controlled thing that you can actually do a study on.
Right.
It's more of an experience thing, and there have been plenty of experiences that with people that I've come in contact with that fall right into that theory.
Interesting.
All right. Well, Cody, unfortunately, we have run out of time. However,
wow.
Why don't you go ahead and any websites you want to give out? T.A.P.S website, R.I.S.E.U.P website, your own website, whatever you got.
Sure. One of the groups I'm with, R.I.S.E.U.P Paranormal, that really long group.
that long name.
RiseUpParanormal.com or the AtlanticParanormalSociety.com. You can reach us there if you need help or need a case anywhere in the world. We'll put you in contact with somebody. If you want information on when I'll be speaking and doing presentations or events, check the Atlantic Paranormal Society's Facebook page. That has all the events. We have a bunch of them coming up in the New England area that I'll be speaking at and going over equipment. So just check me out. You can also email me with questions, Cody DesBiens or Cody Ray DesBiens at yahoo.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to answer me, and I'll answer you back.
Wonderful.
Okay,
and don't give up on that book. I want to read it.
That's
Beautiful.
Right. That's right. When you get
Lynn and Willie.
When you get the book published, we'll have to have you back.
Cool.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cody. Could you hang on the line for a minute so I can talk to you off air afterwards?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. Tonight we've been talking to Cody Ray DesBiens.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. You have a good evening.
In this one of many possible worlds, all for the best, or some bizarre test. It is what it is.